Okay, can you see that okay? It's the correct screen. Okay, great. So I'm really excited to talk about how to thrive as an HSP because I know personally and from working with HSPs how being sensitive in this world can be exhausting. I'm sure you guys can relate with that feeling of exhaustion and just feeling of like survival, maybe especially before you understood you were HSP. But what I found is that we can thrive, and actually they've studied it that even that people who are highly sensitive with the right tools and support can have the potential to be even more successful than someone who is not highly sensitive. And so this is something I really work towards in working with people and in my own life, is not just making it by and not no longer being exhausted, but really thriving and getting to have fun and enjoy life again. And so one of those pieces that I find important to look at when we're talking about thriving is perfectionism, because I haven't met almost any highly sensitive person that hasn't been affected by perfectionism in some way, shape, or form. So I'm just curious from you guys, if you want to either just share in the chat or chime in if you do relate with perfectionism as it being an obstacle for you in some way. Oops. Okay, so and Jules, if there's anything you can share in the chat, but
yeah, Angie, I just said I can relate, and Beth says that she can relate as well. So as we go through, if anyone types in the chat box, I'll read it out for you.
Awesome, thank you. So what you're going to receive and what we'll do today, I just want to share that with you in advance. We're going to learn 4 different tools and perspectives that will help with this area. And then we're going to dive deep into some sort of habit shifting, energy shifting stuff around perfectionism. And so if you guys have something you can write with, we'll do a little bit of reflection during this time. So you can grab that now, or I'll let you know at the end when we're going to do that. And also, I love the engagement. So if you feel free to share, you can chat in the chat box, and we'll have time after your responses to what we're working through, and then any experience you're having, things coming up as we go through this. So it's really intended to be engaging and interactive for you. And also, I'm not just going to throw out tools because it's not my style of coaching. And as an HSP, you can probably relate. Like, I think we like to go deep. We like things to be meaningful and not just, we're just not surface level people. So I don't want to just give you a bunch of tools and that's that. Like, that's only short-term effective, and often we're not going to implement them if we don't have a deeper understanding. So I'm most interested in that deep work for lasting change. And even though we have just one workshop, I believe that there's potential for deeper transformation when we slow down and go deep. So we'll do some of that. And also, as I mentioned, it'll be interactive. I'll be guiding you to tune into your body a little bit as well as yourself. So if you're having any trouble noticing your body, which I'm guessing, Jules, you've done an amazing job of helping people be able to do this. So probably shouldn't be, but that's okay. I know sometimes when we've lived life as a highly sensitive person, that can be one of the things that happens is it's hard to tune into our body. We need to, sometimes we've had these ways to protect ourselves from going into our body. So you don't have to force anything at all if it doesn't feel good, but you'll just benefit from still being here and absorbing. And then that if it is hard for some reason, that's just a little nudge that some practice in it would be good, and some guidance. And sometimes it means there's unhealed trauma or there's unfelt emotion. So there really are so many reasons why it's important that we tune into ourselves and our bodies. A couple of those are our intuition, that's where it is, and our inner wisdom. So I'd love for that to be more possible for you, more practice. And if you already find it easy, that's awesome. Then you're just getting more practice with it today. So who am I? My name is Angie Ilg, and I'm a life coach. As Jules mentioned, I work with highly sensitive people who struggle with things like most of the common things are insecurity, people pleasing, perfectionism, indecision, and anxiety. And I help them sort through all of that so that they can stay in their own zone of genius, really get to be to know who they truly are, get to live that out in their life, and finally enjoy life and thrive, as I mentioned, in this world, even if it's a world not built for HSPs the way it's set up right now. I'm also a recovering perfectionist. I'll probably always be a recovering perfectionist. And all the tools we'll use here and processes were created from what I found that works to go from perfectionism to more ease and joy in your life. So first, I want to share all the different ways just so we can kind of think about the different ways perfectionism shows up. And there's probably more than even what I'll list. So maybe some of these speak to you. Maybe they show up in your decision making, your speaking. I've seen it show up in, of course, how you look, your personality, what you say, work, personal projects, relationships. It can definitely show up in all the roles that we play, maybe mom, sister, daughter, roles at work, friend, aunt, any of these roles. And for the men who are watching, dad, brother, all these roles we play can show up. And it can look all sorts of different ways. It could, for you, it might be more overthinking or analyzing, trying too hard, rumination. Maybe you spend extra time on stuff that's like way more than necessary. Procrastination is a huge one that I noticed. This is one I have to be lovingly conscious of for myself. If I'm resisting or procrastinating, oftentimes there's perfectionism involved. That inner critic is usually a flag. And then anxiety.
Angie,
Oh yeah.
sorry, I'm so sorry to interrupt you,
No.
but are you moving your slides forward?
Oh yeah, are they not moving?
They're not moving.
Oh no, okay.
Yeah, so I realized you were saying a lot, but we had only seen the front slide. So
weird.
now is it, can everyone see the slide has moved? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to just test it one more time to see if it?
Yes. So
Yeah. So now it's
can you
moving.
see?
Okay. Yeah, we can see. Hi, I'm Angie.
Okay, I apologize.
Brilliant. Okay, no
Okay.
problem.
So I don't know why that happened, but it's moving now.
Yeah, and we heard what you were saying, so no
Okay.
problem.
So there's the visual, just the visuals help, I think, to kind of bring it in, at least, even though that's a little faster than normally what it would be. Okay. So if it's not, let me know, but hopefully that solved it. It's just a glitch. All right. So what is perfectionism? Actually, because you're highly sensitive, I'm guessing you already have a pretty good sense of what it is. And you're more so interested in moving away from it, would be my guess, and not towards it. So we're actually going to talk about what imperfectionism is. And imperfectionism is the opposite of perfectionism. It's without forcing or controlling, allowing things to be as they are, to have flaws, and to be good enough. So just now that you can see that screen, reading it, feeling that.
Angie, sorry again, but I think we're on a different screen. Yeah, now it's moving.
Okay, I'm gonna do here. Let me real quick. Is it okay if I just
yeah, because I'm not sure why it's
because it's changing on mine and then okay. So I'll just change my screen so that I can make sure I see what you guys are seeing a little bit better. Should be good, right?
Yeah, so we can see it now.
Okay. So reading this this definition, I just want you to tune in as you read that. Without forcing or controlling, allowing things to have flaws, to be good enough, just tuning into your body. How does that feel as you take that in with imperfectionism? So what imperfectionism means? It means focusing on what you value and what feels right for you, rather than getting it, quote, right, based on external standards and ideas, which there are plenty of. And what it does not mean because just to calm any fears, if someone has them about imperfectionism, about leaning into it, here's what it does not mean. It does not mean doing a crappy job, not caring, not following through. So you don't have to worry, you can still do a good job and make pretty things and look nice and have pretty space, be amazing, and not do it perfectly. So let's talk about the 4 tools and perspectives I mentioned I was going to share with you. So this first one, tool number 1, is mistakes as success steps. So viewing them as success steps when you do make mistakes. This is a philosophy of mine and something I've seen so true evidentially, that they are required. Mistakes are required for success steps. And as I've worked with clients, when we start to slow down and talk about what they feel and believe about mistakes, often they haven't realized how much meaning and judgment there is on the mistakes they could make, or how much avoidance there is of mistakes they could possibly make. And although in some ways it may consciously seem obvious, for example, like trial and error, unconsciously we might have decided they're bad or something to fear, as I was mentioning with my clients. So with this tool, you're busting through that old paradigm and unconscious misunderstanding. And one way we can really tangibly practice this tool is through celebrating mistakes. So first, you're just making that decision, like, I've decided I believe mistakes are success steps. So when I make one, I'm going to celebrate it. And you can create a little celebration practice. I remember when I was first starting this journey with this piece of imperfectionism, that it was really uncomfortable to allow myself to lean in and view them as possibly as success steps. So I kind of made it lighter by going like a little over the top, like, oh my God, that's awesome, I messed it up, like do a little dance, just kind of find a way to practice this thing that didn't feel right yet. So there's this quote that I love from Thomas Edison that says, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And I think that really kind of encapsulates mistakes as success steps. Again, they really are required for success. So the sooner that we can get on board with making mistakes and love that we do, the sooner we can move forward towards success, whatever that means for you. And that doesn't mean the same thing for everyone, but whatever that looks like and feels like for you. So, okay, tool number 2. I have a question for you guys. What would you say is actually better than perfect? If there was something better than perfect, if you have any guesses. No guesses?
And feel free to unmute yourselves or type. So Beth has said imperfection in the chat box, and if anyone wants to unmute, feel free to.
Okay, so thank you, Beth. Also, done is better than perfect. The thing is, with done actually exists. So perfect does not. It doesn't exist in this world. So I'd rather have you going for something that's possible. It's a much more fun goal to aim for. I guarantee there's a lot of joy that comes from saying, like, this is done, even though it's not perfect. And the other reason this tool is so helpful is because perfectionism and procrastination usually work hand in hand. Like I mentioned on that slide, you guys couldn't see, was that perfectionism is one of the ways it shows up. And this gets you out of perfectionism and into action. So you might be wondering how specifically to use this tool, which is always important with any tool. It's like, how do I implement? And I always want to ground it in and really make it tangible. So the way to tangibly practice this tool is really simple. There are actually 2 different ways. The first is to let it be good enough and let it be done, and practice this tool as that philosophy. So really simple. You can shift your energy into a different energy when you choose to, when you make that decision. Although, of course, I know simple is not always easy, because if we're someone who has struggled with a lot of perfectionism, there's all that unconscious programming and patterns. So you might have fears come up as you try this, or any of the tools. And that's why in just a little bit, we'll explore those fears and that deeper work I mentioned, and see if we can create a little freedom around them. So with this tool, when you feel that urge inside to keep perfecting, you simply challenge yourself to say, this is good enough and it's done. And practice really works with all of these tools. It doesn't have to happen the first time, but little bit by little bit. So remembering good enough is good enough. And I also want to emphasize there's usually no big risk to trying this out for a little bit, but there's a huge potential for a lot of reward in the form of more ease, more time, and even more satisfaction and enjoyment. And the other way you use this tool is when you feel yourself procrastinating and putting something off because deep down you fear you won't do a good enough job. In this case, you can tell yourself done is better than perfect, and go ahead and take that step forward. Movement feels better than stuckness. I promise you that. If you've felt stuck ever, or in the recent past, like that feeling is not fun, not comfortable. Okay, so tool number 3 is process over perfection. And this is really feminine over some unattainable, more masculine energy. So we live in a society that really completely overvalues getting to the goal or the achievement, which is more of a masculine energy, to achieve and to get to the end, and undervalues the process, which is more feminine, process oriented, to get there, and everything you receive along the way. So kind of reflecting within yourself, can you think of a time when you were going through something or working towards a goal, and maybe it was applying for a job or renovating a house, or in a phase of life where you're dating, just some random examples, but maybe think of something that you're working towards, and think of all the things you learned along the way, all the experiences you had. We gain so much in the process. And you can also think of this as progress. So progress over perfection. We're constantly growing and learning and evolving, and we're never really, quote, there. We never really get there. And the way this looks tangibly, as I mentioned, I always want it to feel grounded, is to really relish in where you're at, to look for the gold in what you're going through right now, even if things aren't all tied up pretty in a bow, because are they ever completely like tied up? In my life, no, they're not. Like sometimes there are parts of it that feel that way, but there's always parts undone, parts in process. And so it's about really trusting. And for this tool, you can use the affirmation, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now. So what can you love? And you can think about, whatever it is you're going through, wherever you're at, what is it you love about what you're experiencing and receiving, even if things aren't all tied up neat in a bow. So maybe even in the program you're in, being like Beth, I think you mentioned, you're still catching up, like even just feeling good in that, wherever you're at there, and like all that you're already receiving and growing can be helpful when you, in a way to use this tool. Okay, so tool number 4 is, I think it's one of my favorites, and it's super fun and empowering, and honestly, sometimes does blow my mind to put this into practice. So the tool is challenging the fear and making it an experiment and a game to actually mess up, to aim to mess up. You could say, I have to mess this up And the consequences are not as dire as you imagine them to be. For the most part, there's not huge risks or irreversible consequences in experimenting. And I use this all the time, actually. When I was creating this presentation, I used it because there was procrastination happening. And I was really intimidated about making the slides because I kind of put it off. It just felt a little bit big. So I used a combination of tool number 2, which is done is better than perfect, as well as this tool to help myself get to work. And it works. It always works. I use this a lot in when I do writing as well. That I just kind of, before I even get started, I'm like, well, I have to mess this up. And I moved, so I'm setting up my house, and it was really stressful to think about like the design of all of that. And I said, you know what, why don't I just have that philosophy of like, I have to mess it up. And it really just frees up the energy. And as one of my coaches used to say, when it comes to any tool, it works if you work it. They might sound simple, but really, when you work them, they're powerful. Simple is powerful. Okay, so to make this tangible, you playfully give yourself the goal or even the command. You can command yourself to mess it up. And you can say, yes, I have to mess this up. Good, I'm so glad I messed it up. This is so bad, I love it. Okay, so those are the 4 tools, and we'll recap. You'll have these slides, and we'll recap at the end to make sure you've got it, and you can pick 1 or 2 of your favorites to try out right away. So now let's, as I mentioned, I'm not just gonna throw the tools out there. I want to go a little bit deeper to that more root level of transformation, because I really know that if we're looking at a garden and there's these weeds and we just cut the weeds off at the top, they're just going to regrow. So when we can go in and we can dig up a little bit, then it doesn't grow back and we can plant something else. And this is where it really gets juicy, because they're no good if you've got all that unconscious stuff blocking you from even using them, which does sometimes happen. So I want you to think about deep down, really, what is this about for you? I talked about that power of slowing down and going within and challenging these old ideas we had. So if you don't have that pen and paper handy, go ahead and grab it. There's a lot of power in putting pen to paper, and research shows that it activates different parts of our brain than just thinking it through or even typing something out. So it also has a way of connecting us to deeper parts within ourselves and some of those things that might be buried a little bit. And that being said, if you end up only typing out, that's fine, or thinking them through, that's okay. There's still value there. Okay, so I want you to think about growing up, what messages did you pick up about mistakes or messing up? And some of these may be deep-seated. So I want you to take some time to think about you as a little kid. What did you hear from your family or absorb from your community and culture? And I'll give you some quick examples. And these are some common root causes. So if you hear one of these that resonates, you might explore specific ways it shows up for you. So some of these messages: I'm not good enough. Mistakes are bad or unsafe. I'll only be loved if I do a good job. My productivity is my value and worth. And I'll just say that again. I'm not good enough. Mistakes are bad or unsafe. I'll only be loved if I do a good job. My productivity is my worth and value. So just reflecting, what is it for you? We'll just take a minute or so. And feel free to share if there's anything you want to share in the chat. Okay, so hopefully you got to write down a couple things. And if anyone's open to sharing, you could unmute yourself or chat. What were those stories you learned about growing up? And because honestly, I bet you're not the only one, whether it's someone here or watching who shares those stories. And also, as I mentioned, some of them are deep-seated. So if it's unclear right now or not much is coming up, you can allow this to percolate as you think about this question today and tomorrow, and as this percolates within you. Yeah, anyone have anything to share? It's okay if not. No? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Oh, whoopsies, 1 second. Okay, so now I want you to take some time to think about, sorry, I'm losing my spot. So I want you to ask yourself, of all these things you learned, anything you wrote down, just check in, is that true? Is it true that I'm not good enough? Is it true that mistakes are bad? Can I know without a shadow of a doubt? Can I know without a shadow of a doubt that I'll only be loved if I do a good job? And I want you to ask this to your older, wiser adult self. That part of you that can help you show up for yourself and what is most important. So yeah, you can ask yourself, can I know without a shadow of a doubt, would I bet my life on it? And that's it. Just simply question and get curious. And this may be the first time you've ever thought about this and brought light to these more underlying beliefs. So simply check in and see if it's true for you right now. And it may have reigned true for your life and your circumstances and survival when you were little, but what about now? Okay, great. So the next question I want you to think about is, what messages did you covertly or overtly receive when it comes to what makes you valuable? What did you learn about your work? What did you learn that your worth is determined by? So for example, if I have something good to offer, that's where it comes from. If I perform well, if I'm needed, if I please others, then I'm valuable or worthy. So what is it for you? What are these messages? And maybe they don't reign true anymore, but maybe they were for a while in your life. So just taking a minute again to reflect one or two things. Did anyone need more time? Good, okay. Okay. So now I want you to really tune into your deeper, wiser self as best you can and ask yourself, is this true to my soul? Whatever it is you learned about your worth and your value. And just simply notice what answer rises, simply a yes or a no. Okay. Okay, so everything that we do, even the things we don't like, they all benefit us. So, those annoying, like habitual things you say you want to stop doing, those patterns, but you just can't seem to, there's always a benefit. When we can uncover that benefit, we can find other more effective ways to get that same benefit without staying in the misery of the pattern we no longer want. So does that make sense? Okay. So here are some of the ways it may be benefiting you. For example, you might be getting praise. You might feel safe because it seems like you're in control. That's a big one. You might feel more lovable when you get things right or don't make mistakes, or it's comforting because you're used to it, simply. So what about you? So how is perfectionism benefiting you most in your life right now? Again, I'll just give you about a minute. Okay, hopefully you've all had a chance to kind of think of one or two ways. So with that, thinking about that benefit, what's another more productive way or more effective long-term way that you could meet that need or desire more directly? So let's take an example, since that might be not a super clear question. So a example for the benefit of it feeling safe because it seems like you're in control. What's another way we can create safety for ourselves that's going to feel better overall and be more productive? This is really where it gets magical and juicy when we get down to this layer of what that pattern is how that pattern is benefiting us, and find another way that gives us the outcome we actually want to meet that benefit. So for in that example that I was just sharing of feeling safe, it feels safe because it seems like you're in control. So another way we can create that internal safety that's going to feel better and be overall more productive and create what we want long term. This could be internally or externally. So we could ask for a hug from a friend. That creates safety. You could wrap yourself in a blanket. You can begin switching that inner critic voice to a more friendly voice. And that's that one is one that if you've done any practice with it, I've found it takes time to get the inner critic to change, but it is possible. And especially if you have the support of someone like a coach, it can be really it's really doable even when you've had that inner critic for a long time. But when we start to switch that can create way more safety. And I'm sure you can guess long term more of the outcomes we want than what the control seems to be creating in our life. And if anyone wants to share anything in the chat or otherwise, if you want to unmute, I'd love to hear what the benefit is for you and an idea for how you can create that benefit in a more helpful, more direct way. Anyone open to sharing anything? And if not, we can chat about it at the end. Okay. So, okay, let's really bring those fears up now, because until we bring light to them, we can't really do anything about it. And awareness is always the first step. So, so what are you afraid would happen if you didn't get it right or perfect? Here are some examples. I'm afraid I'll lose the success that I do have. And some of these come directly from, people I've worked with as they've been healing this. I'm afraid I'll be judged or rejected. I'm afraid I'll disappoint someone. I'm afraid of failure. That's a big one. So go ahead and take a minute or two to listen, and we're almost done with the questions. I know this is a lot. Go ahead and take a minute or two to just listen to what's coming up for you. If you're not sure, you can ask yourself, if I were to know what it is, what might it be? Okay, so if you need more time, just let me know. Now we're going to do a similar switch as that last question. So first we need to find out deep down, what does this fear really want for you? So for example, I'm afraid I'll lose the success that I do have. So that fear really wants success for you, simply. Or I'm afraid I'll be judged or rejected. That fear wants acceptance. I'm afraid I'll disappoint someone. So that fear may want love or acceptance. I'm afraid of failure. This one could be multiple different things. You can ask yourself, why do you not want to fail? And work your way to the desire or need from there. So go ahead and tune in. What's that deep down thing that fear really wants for you? And once you've got the deep down need or desire that the fear is about, you can ask yourself, what's one way you can meet either this need or this desire more directly and effectively? So we'll do one example. This example, I'm afraid I'll be judged or rejected, and that the desire or need there was acceptance. So how can you more productively create acceptance in your life? Again, this can be both internal and external. So internally, you can tune into your heart and take 3 deep breaths, imagining love spreading out from your heart and all around you. And I'm not sure, I don't know about you guys, but for me as an HSP, for some reason, visualization is really, really helpful. So when I can visualize these things, it shifts energy. You can do mirror work once a day for the next week, saying positive affirmations to yourself about what you love and value about yourself. There are lots of different ways to do mirror work, and happy to answer if there are any questions about that. Or you can start, these are all just examples. You could start an acceptance practice where you write down 3 things every day you love and value about yourself. And maybe you've got better stuff, that you're coming up with. So feel free to share anything about what that need or desire was under the fear, and another way you could meet the desire. Okay. So really great job taking that time to slow down. As I mentioned, when we slow down, there's so much power. There's so much power in it. And you'd be surprised what can happen with a little bit of work like this and going within. Sometimes it only takes a little bit of time to realize something that's been there for a long time. A lot of times I'll hear from my clients things like, I don't even feel like I did that much, but so much changed. That's because we are not often taking that time and reflecting in our culture. But when we do, so our energy really shifts within. And that energy works on that different plane than time. So it can feel like we didn't even do that much, didn't even take that long, but we can have big shifts. And so that's something I really love about this work. And even if you just felt something small or had like a small insight or brought light to one thing, that's significant. You change your energy, and if your energy changes, everything changes. So great work there with that. So we'll just do a recap. So you feel good and taking away whatever you want from this. So there were four tools and perspectives that you got to try out. You learned to view mistakes as success steps because they are required for you to be successful. And the tangible way to use this tool is to try out a little celebration practice of either past or present mistakes, big or small. And maybe you dance, maybe you cheer, maybe you celebrate with a friend. Just make it ridiculous and silly, and whatever works for you. Feel free to laugh at yourself in the process. And in tool number 2, we learned done is better than perfect. Remember, done actually exists. Perfect does not. So it's best to aim for goals that actually exist. And you can use this tool by simply practicing it as a philosophy and letting good enough be good enough, You can also use it with procrastination and just remind yourself, done is better than perfect, that mantra. Then go ahead and take that step forward. And remember, movement feels better than stuckness. And then the third tool, we learned process over perfection, which could also be progress over perfection. And for this tool, it's really about relishing in where you're at, just getting into it and looking for the gold in what you're going through, even if things are not all tied up and pretty with a bow. And this requires you to dig deep for some trust, since you're not there yet, wherever there is. And for this one, you can use the affirmation, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now. It's about discovering what you can love about what you're experiencing and receiving, even if things aren't looking all done and all pretty and tied up. And then this last tool is that one that can be really fun and challenging. It's challenging the fear and making it an experiment or a game to actually mess up, to aim to mess up, to say you have to mess up. And remember, the consequences are not as dire as you imagine them to be. So to make this one tangible, you can playfully give yourself the goal or even the command to mess it up. You can say, yes, I have to mess this up. I'm so glad I did. This is so bad. I love it. And feel free to share in the comments. Now, if there's one of these that you're feeling like you want to try out, and remember, with these tools, it works if you work it. So as a goal, I would invite you to pick one or two and just try them out for the next 72 hours to commit to a few days and see what happens, or even just 24 to 48 hours, just a small experiment and seeing what's possible. Okay. And then we went deep, lastly, and really dug into the messages you received growing up about making mistakes and about your value and worth. And you explored how perfectionism is benefiting you and what you're afraid might happen without it. And you found ways to meet those underlying needs and desires more directly, which is so powerful. So your mission, if you choose to accept, is to pick one or two of your favorite tools and put it into practice for the next 72 hours. And with all the journaling and inner work we did, to really allow things to bubble up and percolate, maybe throughout the evening or into tomorrow or just the rest of the week, and jot things down as they come up or make a mental note of what you're discovering, and then just see what's possible. So, okay. Thank you guys again for welcoming me into your space and being willing to explore. And I'm looking forward to conversation and to hear, anything that resonated for you or questions you might have. I'm really so grateful for this opportunity to share what I've learned along the way as a recovering perfectionist, as an HSP, and with this piece of the puzzle when it comes to really getting to feel good and enjoy life and thrive. And share this bit that I've learned, from my own life as well as with clients, to really see myself and others break free from those chains and limitations that can be so limiting to be in that place of perfectionism. There really is so much ease and fun on the other side of it. And then I also wanted to share, if you want to find out find more of the free resources that are related to being HSP, you can check out my blog as well. There's 80+ articles on there on my website. This is the page, and you can find the blog right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but so yeah, there's that. And I will go ahead and stop sharing. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Angie. Really appreciate those tools. And like you said, I feel actually a lot of what you shared today connects a lot with what Tiffany shared in our last workshop. And also, yeah, I feel these tools are so simple in a way, but they are so powerful and so effective. And it's really interesting because as you were talking, I was relating to a lot of the ways it shows up in my life and how it showed up in terms of my business and the work I do. As an example, I don't know if many of you know, but I have a podcast. And it took me years to get the podcast going because I had this idea and I kept on thinking, I don't know how to record a podcast. I don't have a microphone. I don't know what content I'm going to put out there. I have no idea. And I just kept on thinking about it for so long. And then one day I decided, you know what? Doing it is better than not doing it at all. So I just need to do it. And I just did it. And so it relates to when you said that the process, the process over perfectionism. So in the end, the process of doing it for me is one of the most enjoyable things I do. I love doing the podcast. And the quality of it might not be perfect, but I managed to get so much information out there by doing the podcast. So yeah, I just wanted to share that I could relate a lot to what you were talking about today in my personal life. So it would be great to hear questions or sharings or comments from people. And obviously in relation to the topic today and Angie's workshop, but if you have anything to ask me about the course content, then now is a good time to ask that as well. So feel free to unmute yourselves or type in the chat box as well.
Yeah, maybe from my side, yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, learned quite some new things today. Yeah, maybe for me, the most interesting point or like something like that, yeah, what was a good input for me was like, so yeah, I was already currently like kind of working with seeing that. So for example, talking about perfectionism, I have like, I would say quite high values and I like, I don't know, trustworthiness and reliability and such, and always try to keep up with those. And yeah, I guess putting myself under a lot of pressure that way. And so like I'm already in the process of realizing that and working with that. And then like how you mentioned that, yeah, that like these things give me something like yeah, you mentioned some feelings or some needs that I have, and yeah, realizing that okay, so yeah, or like that there could be other ways to fulfill those, and like finding these ways. So that's yeah, something to like I want to focus on. And maybe a question relating to that, if there's, so you gave some examples, but do you have like more content on that, or more yeah ideas or so? Maybe like if one of your articles or something is about that.
Yeah, I actually have some articles on trust, which always end up linking to perfectionism. And then also, and I'm happy to share, to go and look and find them and give them to Jules if you want the specific articles. But I did also write on some on perfectionism as well. And I love the piece you were talking about with the values, because values are, I find like when we can live our life based on our values, it could actually cut through perfectionism. I can see perfectionism being tricky in a sneaky way of making us become perfectionist about our values. But the truth is that there's pretty separate different things that values are actually something we can lean on to not do other less helpful things, like really overreacting to taking action based on just our emotions and not something deeper like our values, if that makes sense. But I could see how it could come into play of like then sort of twisting it where if, well, my value is to be trustworthy, and if I did something that wasn't trustworthy, beating yourself up about it. But that really comes back to more the relationship you have with yourself, which I know is something that you guys have probably talked about a lot in this group, and really healing that relationship. And then you mentioned find like other examples of ways to meet those needs, right? Yeah, and that's an awesome question to just ask. I love how powerful it can be, the questions we ask ourselves. there's this quote from Tony Robinson, who is not always my favorite, but he did say, the quality of our life is directly related to the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. So we have so much wisdom already within ourselves that when we just stay curious, which I think is something that is really helpful for any type of growth work, just being curious. And when we ask ourselves those quality questions like, what is another way I could meet that need? You'd be surprised at what might come up. And it doesn't have to be something that is complicated. Often it's not. When we're connecting with a deeper place in ourselves, that those answers are there. And I love keeping it simple. Have you guys talked about regulating the nervous system, like co-regulation at all, specifically?
Yeah, so this week, there's some information about the fight, flight, and freeze response. And
Yeah.
we've spoken about mindfulness, meditation, and breath work for regulating the nervous system. And also, just to add to that, again, related to what we spoke about a few weeks ago, this idea of having a core self, we spoke about this concept of like anchoring in our core self, which when you ask that question from that place, when you're connected to your core self, or you could understand it as your higher self, when you're in a very mindful state, then yeah, you can receive those answers to those questions from that place, right? I feel like that's, yeah, what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I know sometimes it's harder when we don't yet have that connection really established and nurtured, but that happens bit by bit. So it does happen by doing the work you're doing in this program, and just taking those little tiny moments, even like we did today, little tiny moments of, unlike the what Jules was leading us through at the beginning, moments where we're slowing down and tuning a little bit in, a little bit more and more, because the more you're doing that along your journey, the stronger that connection is. It's kind of like, it's like exercise, it's cumulative, your muscles are growing, and then they're just there, like the answers are just there, and it's like, oh, I need this. And I know you guys talked about needs, like the nonviolent communication table of needs. So it can become really easy to know what you need. And when we're talking about regulation, that can be things you do with yourself or with others that help your nervous system come back to a place that feels good, in that like nice zone of not being overly stimulated or understimulated. Those are all things, for example, getting a hug from someone, or talking to a coach or a therapist, or taking a walk, like really simple things that are going to be more direct ways to meet a need than something like trying to control a situation, which is like a more frantic energy. So usually when we're meeting those needs in a more direct, long-term effective way, it's a different kind of energy. It feels a little simpler, a little calmer, a little more body-based. So was that helpful? Yeah. Okay.
And I can add just quickly to that. Also, it relates to self-compassion. We've spoken a lot about self-compassion, and I automatically would say revert to that practice over anything else. So if you're not sure what you're needing or what that part of you is needing, do the self-compassion, offer yourself that self-love and kindness. And that's really, really powerful in itself. So if you don't know what the need is, then revert to the self-love.
I love that so much. Love to share an example real quick of that. So in the recent past, a couple times, one time I was starting to tell a story, and it was the group of people, and I started to realize like, oh, wait, I don't really want to tell this story right now. It's like slightly embarrassing. Why am I telling this? But I'd already started. And then, so after I was done, I started to feel this, like all this, like, judgment, like a shame spiral. And instead of going into that spiral with all that energy happening, I turned to compassion and was like, it's okay. anyone can make a mistake. Who knows? It's okay that you're feeling that way. Just going into compassion, because when we are in a more triggered state, it's hard to see things clearly. And this, we can get triggered by many different things that also happened by something I read in a book recently that was just very triggering for me. And I knew, like, the energy got so frantic and frenetic again that I knew the only thing to do was really allow myself to feel that and kind of speak to my younger self. And, like little me, 7-year-old me, and like, she's just having emotions right now. She just needs to have the emotions. And that's a big shift from what it used to be, where it'd be like more continue in the spiral of frantic and try to figure it all out and have those answers of like, what's happening? What do I need? Versus just simply the compassion, which allows you to be in that moment and to feel your feelings. So I'm really glad you like made that connection of that's always can be a default. So,
am I? No, you can hear me now.
I can hear you.
Beth or Nancy, if you want to share, feel free to unmute yourselves, or any questions, any reflections. Hi, Beth.
I guess I'll go. I guess the thing that kind of shaped my life, it's kind of a roundabout way to what we're talking about, was like I was raised by in an authoritarian household. And so I was the baby of 7 children. And so I grew up being the observer, got the label of being shy and all that. And we were raised, the main thing that resonated with me was fear. So to do the right thing, or just the way everything was run in our household was fear-based. Like if you're crying, like as a 5-year-old, you need to stop right now. Like this kind of thing where you're gulping and you're sobbing and, telling, and that happened to me. And it's like everything was, based on fear. And then that carried over into my adult life. And so I grew up watching interactions between my family, and, that built perfectionistic things within me for sure. Because, watching people get in trouble, or if you don't do this, and, maybe if I do it perfectly, then, I won't have these consequences. And then we moved when I was 15 to another state and left all my family behind except me and my parents. And I'd always had buffers my whole life. So I didn't have to I watched and didn't have to interact, get in the middle of things, because I had a very loud family. And so then I became a mediator between my parents because they used to fight all the time. And when you're asking about what was I looking for out of that, and it was for peace. So I would mediate between them because I had this skill to do that, but it was more for me I wanted peace. I wanted it to stop. And then that eventually, not to make it any longer than it already is, but that eventually led me to working with at-risk teenagers for 20 some years. But I didn't find out that I was an HSP until about 5-6 months ago, and I'm 61 years old. So I was talking to my therapist, and I had always said to people, I always feel like I'm empath-like. I'm not an empath, but I feel things that other people, and teenagers would always talk to me when I taught them martial arts, and that's what got me into working with at-risk kids. And so it was like this thread from my childhood of being an observer. But the fear thing is the thing that I have the hardest time with, because that's where I go. Like when I'm overwhelmed, and I overreact, and it's all out of fear-based. And if I can take a step back, then that's kind of what I'm working on now, because it's, you get caught up in that drama that I was always around. And so if I can kind of give myself a break, like you're saying, and talk to myself and recenter, then and ask those questions, like, where's that coming from? What's the worst thing that could happen? So that's kind of the stuff that I'm doing now, but it's very strange. I don't know how many people at my age like discover that they're, an HSP. And I was the one. I said to my therapist, I started researching, and then I said, I think this is what I am. And she was like, oh my gosh, you totally are. I didn't even get that. So it's kind of strange for me being an older person, but it makes a lot of things make a lot of sense now in my life, of choices I made, of why I did things a certain way. And so for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think with that piece, wanting and needing that piece, I can relate a lot with that, first of all, but it sounds like you're kind of naturally discovering some things to do to meet that need for yourself. And I think sometimes it can be internal, but it can also be external. Like if we have relationships in our life that as an adult, if they're toxic, we can move them out. As a kid, you don't really have much say. And I was thinking about with perfectionism, why is it that a lot of HSPs have that come up and struggle? And I think it's partially that it's a response to intensity, in our bodies and in our environment, as something we learned as like, at least this could make something safer if we were modeled, that means we're good and worthy. So it sounds like maybe that piece was sometimes modeled for you in that way. And I know a lot of people that did discover this piece way later on. I don't know why it's not more known within psychology, because I had that similar experience, and the same thing with clients. Like once they discovered it, like everything made sense. And it wasn't like there was something wrong with you, but you were simply, your nervous system is different. And so you responded to this environment that you didn't have control over, and created, these systems to try to just feel okay. So yeah, in another group I was in, there were several people that were much older than me, and then they had just discovered it too. So yeah.
Yeah, and I can add to that quickly as well, Beth, just to reassure you that I have a lot of people reaching out to me who are in their 50s, 60s, and saying they didn't know about this, they didn't know these traits existed. And I do feel like it's only in the past few years that the research is really starting to grow, and people are really starting to discover what it means to be sensitive. So you're definitely not alone in that. And also, you mentioned, your experience as a child and how that led you to work with vulnerable teenagers and at-risk kids. And I've probably mentioned this before, but the concept of the wounded healer. And this week, I shared an article about trauma and awakening. I don't know if you've read it yet, but this idea that often it is our struggles that lead to our strengths and our gifts in life, right? So it can be really difficult to see it at the time, especially when we're children. But I do believe that the challenges we go through are what enable us to cultivate the gifts that we need to then serve or help other people, right? And that really stood out to me when you were sharing. I was really feeling that's part of your journey. There's one more thing I was going to say. Yeah, just about talking about children. It feels it's important for you to keep communicating with your inner child, because it's your inner child that feels that fear. It's not you as an adult, but it's the inner child that is always with us. So a practice I do is I visualize my inner child, and I speak to her. I keep talking with her on a daily basis. When she gets afraid, when she doesn't want to be seen, when she wants to run away, I just keep talking and having a dialogue with her. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. And yeah, it can sound a bit crazy as well when we're adults, you know, whatever age we are, to think that we still have this inner child in us, but we do. It's always there. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but to keep working with her if you can.
No, I think it's helpful. I did specifically like a thing one time where I visualized like my teenage self, because I had a lot of stuff around there, and then like my around 5, it was like I was in like a redwoods forest, because that's a comforting place to me. And so we, kind of all met, and but that I've only done that like once, but it was incredibly helpful. So I think, what you're saying about doing it more often would be the best thing for me to try to do.
Another thing I found really helpful with that was I'd carry around a little picture of myself as like a 7-year-old, like put it in my wallet. I had that in my wallet for years, just so you can pull it out and like connect, with that inner child.
Nancy, no pressure, but did you want to share or ask anything? I know your dog was barking as well. I hope he or she is okay.
Yeah, the kitchen door was open and sticks his head out the cat flap and barks at the foxes in the back garden. But I've taken care of that. It's in everything that you said, Angie. It's like, yes. And I mean, the last 5 years, I've done a lot of inner work, and with my, inner child, little Nancy. Because I don't remember a lot of my childhood. It was traumatic. And it's funny because I was diagnosed with PTSD in my late 20s, but it was just this label slapped on, and I didn't really understand it. It's only been in the last 5 years. And, yeah. But the one distinct memory that I have would be, I like to hide behind a chair whenever I was upset. I couldn't bear, and it clicked because I have to be strong, and I have to be perfect. Whatever I do, it's, I've got to do it, and it's got to be perfect. And it is exhausting. I'm exhausted. And that was it. About 5 years ago, I was working full time, and I felt like I hit a brick wall. I had a cold, being in the classroom, and I just couldn't get over whatever bug I had. And, working through things with my therapist, I realized that how much stuff I've been carrying and holding in my body, because things would trigger me, which I know now are triggers. And it is exhausting. It is just so exhausting. And discovering that, oh, yes, I'm a highly sensitive person. It makes so much sense. I used to work in retail, and Christmas time, it was so overwhelming. The people and the lights and the balls and the colors, and I would go from the train station to the shop. I would stay in the shop, do my job, eat my lunch in the back room, and then again, like, shield myself to go home. And that feeling of like, I feel like there's something wrong with me, that I can't be out with people. But it's just because of how I pick up other people's energies and things like that. So yeah, anyways. Yeah. So hearing other people, oh, okay, I'm not alone, makes a big difference. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for the communities I have of HSPs, that because it's just so easy to have the story, there's something wrong with me as an HSP, especially before you know you are.
Yes, and the story that I have carried with me, first it was like, I'm a survivor. That's the story I've been carrying around. I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. Everything I do, I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. And it's just been in this past year. Thank you, COVID, because, the beginning of this year, I had 3 months at home. And I was allowed to just be at home. I didn't have to make an excuse why I just can't cope with the outside world. It was just like, it was a gift. Where was I going with that? Yes, because it's like, you know what? No, that story has to change. I'm not a survivor. Yeah, I'm thriving. It still wobbles back and forth, but yeah.
Yeah, COVID, I'm grateful in that sense as well, because it was only in that time that I started to realize, wow, I really am exhausted. And like, I was saying yes to all these things and it's too much. And it gave me the experience of less in my life, and to realize that feels natural for me. Like it's way more natural for me to have less, do less, be around people less, and that actually allows me to feel good and have energy. And then like allowing that to be my norm. And that's another piece I think of thriving as an HSP, is really owning that whatever feels right for you, owning that as not like, oh, I can't handle this. No, like I operate differently, and I would rather enjoy those times I have with people than overdo it, even if that means doing a lot less than other people.
Yeah, it reminds me of the idea that being less than perfect is also saying no to things, and knowing that we don't have to say yes to everything or people please, right? So yeah, it's so important. And Nancy, just to relate to what you said, yeah, that sense of when we're trying to please everyone or be perfect, like the amount of energy that takes up, like I can feel it in my body, that sense of feeling constricted or feeling weighed down. And then just how liberating it is when you can, relating to what Angie shared, just say, well, enough is enough. Like, this is fine. It's okay to make mistakes. And Angie, it's really interesting because it occurred to me that your slides weren't working properly, and that in a way that could have been seen as a mistake, or like, oh no, it's not working, or the presentation isn't flowing. And I thought, mate, did you do that on purpose to show us an example of imperfection?
It's so funny because so I that's a good call, but it was like, it didn't have to bother me, I was like, oh, it would have been nice if you guys, because it could have absorbed that more easily, but past totally under the controls of perfectionism, that would have been like, oh, why did that happen?
Yeah, it's a great example in action.
Yeah, it's good enough,
It's good enough, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much, Angie.
I'm
aware that we're pretty much at time here, so it's been lovely to see everyone. And I think it's just so nice that it is a small group, because we have that space to fully share our experiences and have time for it as well. So for everyone here, I'm going to send out an email, because I'm going to do another Zoom call in 2 weeks on the 1st of December. And it won't be a workshop or a presentation. I just want to give everyone who can make it an opportunity to show up and again, ask any questions or share experiences of the course we've been doing and the content. So it's basically just an open Zoom call for anyone who wants to come, so we can connect and talk about moving forward as well, like next steps or what we need to do to catch up on the content if you're feeling behind on it. So yeah, so I'll send an email with the information on that to everyone. So thank you again, Angie. And Angie, I know you mentioned the blog posts or articles on your website. If you have any specific ones you want to share in the WhatsApp group, feel free to do that. Otherwise,
great idea.
Yeah, I'll send out your details to everyone though, so they have access to that as well.
Yeah, I will specifically find those ones that, is it pronounced Aiken? Is that how you pronounce your name? Yeah.
I can, yeah.
Aiken. Okay.